Now on Central, News at 10.
From ITN, News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Another cabinet minister says I was investigated too. Sweeping new measures to make you give up your car. Israel and Jordan set the seal on a treaty of hope. And is this the New York apartment to tempt a princess? Good evening. There was another development in the controversial Cash for Questions affair tonight. The Treasury Secretary, Chief Secretary Jonathan Aitken, revealed that he too had been investigated over corruption allegations made by the Harrods owner Mohammed Al-Fayed. Mr. Aitken, the fourth minister to be named, insisted that he'd never been guilty of any impropriety. His statement came as the Prime Minister faced growing criticism about the way one of those ministers, Neil Hamilton, was sacked over additional unsubstantiated allegations. One senior Tory backbencher said what Mr. Major had done was wrong. Tonight, key questions remain unanswered. What exactly were those allegations against Mr. Hamilton, and who made them? Our political editor, Michael Brunson, reports.
Jonathan Aitken, promoted to the Cabinet in the July reshuffle as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, is the latest minister to be drawn into the ever-widening ramifications of the Cabinet Secretary's investigation. But tonight, Downing Street is saying that there are no more, that Sir Robin Butler investigated allegations about Mr. Aitken and Home Secretary Michael Howard, and of course Neil Hamilton and Tim Smith. Tonight, Mr. Aitken, like Mr. Howard earlier, has said that he's not been involved in any impropriety whatsoever.
Sorry, thank you.
Tonight, the Prime Minister was saying nothing further about events of either yesterday or today. Until this evening, the Downing Street shutters had crashed down too. Just look at what Mr. Major said yesterday, they were saying. But in the Commons lobbies, the questions wouldn't go away. The Shadow Trade and Industry Secretary, for example, wrote to the Prime Minister.
We must know the name of this mysterious go-between. We need to know why a minister was forced to leave the government yesterday when last week we were told it wasn't necessary.
On the informant, more angry words today from the chairman of Harrods. Downing Street says the person has requested anonymity. Mr. Al-Fayed says he authorized no one to speak for him. I am in effect accused of the very serious charge of attempting to blackmail the government, he says. Yet that charge is based entirely on what lawyers call hearsay, a statement made by an undisclosed informant. Mr. Hamilton himself has said little apart from defending his statement yesterday, comparing his situation with difficulties the Prime Minister once faced. Many MPs believe that did for Mr. Hamilton, rather than the new allegations cited by Downing Street. The 1990 Register of Members' Interests does show Mr. Hamilton as a director of Plateau Mining. He resigned on becoming a minister. Plateau's shares were suspended 2 years ago. He's also shown as a tax consultant to Mobil Oil. As Mr. Hamilton cleared his desk, friends suggested that the Chief Whip questioned those two clearly declared activities in addition to the earlier allegations of last week. So they're angry. And tonight, one has openly attacked the Prime Minister.
I thought it was an unfortunate decision because the Prime Minister, having said publicly that these were only allegations, were unfounded, took Mr. Hamilton's word for it, knew the facts, of course, which were denied to other people, and then turned around and dropped him. And I think the Prime Minister was wrong, and I think it'll have some rather bad repercussions on the party and on party morale.
Support for Mr. Hamilton, though not criticism of Mr. Major, also came from a member of the government.
The Prime Minister and he agreed that that was the best thing in the circumstances. But of course we still regret it. We still regret the events that have led to this, and I look forward to his clearing his name.
Tonight's events involving Mr. Aitken have brought into sharp contrast the way that allegations against him and Michael Howard were dealt with, and the way that allegations against Mr. Hamilton finally cost Mr. Hamilton his job. But Downing Street sources are stressing tonight that it was the build-up of allegations against Mr. Hamilton which led to a point where the Prime Minister said to Mr. Hamilton, and Mr. Hamilton agreed, that things simply could not go on. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Experts appointed by the government called for a U-turn in government transport policy today and said the 20th century's love affair with the motor car must be brought to an end. The Royal Commission on Environmental Pollution said petrol prices should double to £5 a gallon within 10 years and spending on new roads should be halved. Here's our science editor, Lawrence McGinty.
Tax on petrol was already due to rise by 5% a year, but today's report wants dramatically bigger increases to woo motorists away from their dependence on the car and onto public transport.
I drive because the public transport is such a nightmare. It takes me so long and it's so much hassle to get to work.
I think people would rather travel in the comfort of their own car than have to use public transport, regardless of the cost almost.
The love affair between people and their motor cars is far too strong.
But the love affair has been turbulent, costing villages, for example, dear in noise and pollution. Costs which, today's report says, motorists just don't pay in full. Higher petrol prices will be just a start. For the Commission, the road ahead means that spending on road building should be halved and the money saved switched to improving public transport. There should be a major campaign to make cars greener, and the number of car journeys in towns and cities should be reduced.
The family car is a very important thing for all of us, and that is there to stay. But we cannot allow its unrestricted use, because if we do that, we will be spoiling our environment in a serious way.
Reopening old railway lines like this one near Cambridge, closed by Beeching 30 years ago, would be one way of extinguishing the romance with the car. But today the government showed little sign of giving up the love affair.
The truth is that 90% of journeys in this country are done by road, though we only spend 60% of public expenditure on our roads.
That cuts no ice in cities like Cambridge, already trying to switch to public transport, like this free green bus in the city centre, emitting hardly any pollution and running through restricted pedestrian areas.
I think that people are actually fed up when they see the exhaust pipes belching out unpleasant material. So I think that there is a belief amongst people, residents of Cambridge, that things are not as they ought to be now, that they really can be made better.
Remarkably, Cambridge has tried to make things better by building a bridge over the main railway for pedestrians and cyclists only. There's even a suggestion of building a village of 700 houses here, just for people who will guarantee never to buy a car. The end of the car isn't quite in sight yet, but its heyday is over.
With prayers, balloons and a 21-gun salute, Israel and Jordan signed a peace treaty today, formally ending 46 years of war. President Clinton was there to hear both sides proclaim the time of peace has come. Not there was PLO leader Yasser Arafat. He calls the peace treaty treacherous because it gives Jordan and not the Palestinians guardianship over Muslim holy places in Jerusalem. Our Middle East correspondent Robert Moore reports from Israel.
President Clinton swept in through a desert that was once a minefield to witness a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan that ends a war that began the day the Jewish state was born. After 40 years on the throne,